All right. Last thing we'll do, predict a commit. Let me pull up, which I had pulled up responsibly until we actually got to the segment where I needed it. We're going to do predict a commit. I'm going to run through who Jordan has selected, who I have selected. And what I'll do is I'll read through who I've selected, and then I'll make my pick, and then I'll read through who you've selected, and then you can make your pick. So I have taken offensive lineman Graham Houston, defensive back Zach Fort. Always got to remind Jordan that I do have a check mark next to someone already. Running back Jay Lamar. Offensive lineman Malcolm Gaston, who I've already talked about. You know, Jordan, if you really want to take one to me, Desmond Green's an option that's out there potentially. I'm not saying to do it right now, but just food for thought. Defensive back Tyreek Green, offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell, wide receiver Ryan Mosley, offensive lineman Ekene Boko, offensive lineman Brett Colajay, and defensive lineman Ernest Rankins. I'm going to stick at defensive back. It's a guy that was previously committed to South Carolina that Georgia has liked for a long time now. I don't think that Georgia is a lock to get him, but I think that Georgia was the primary reason why he decommitted from South Carolina, and that is Duluth defensive back Payton Dyer. This is a guy I actually saw for the first time about a year and a half ago now, really when Georgia started to recruit Damola Ajitahan out of Duluth, and I got up to Duluth High School, and all their coaches, their recruiting staff guys, right when I got there, they were like, you got to see this Payton Dyer kid. Like, he's got an offer from Liberty right now. He's going to blow up. And sure enough, they were dead on. This dude is completely blown up. You know, you look at his body type, he is what an SEC defensive back looks like. Like, he is toned up. He looks the part. You know, he's long. Everything that Georgia looks for from its defensive backs, Payton Dyer has. You know, if we're just, you know, being hypercritical here, if you're looking for, you know, he's not, maybe doesn't have the blow you away 4-3 type of speed at corner that sometimes you're looking for. But look, Georgia just had so much success with Kamari Lassiter that I think if you have a certain body type, you have certain coverage skills, you have a certain mental makeup, as long as you hit a certain threshold, like you're in that high 4.4, low 4.5 range, like that's more than enough for Georgia. This is not a done recruitment. You know, Southern Cal, Ohio State. I'm assuming some others are probably going to get in and see him this spring and probably try and make a push to get a summer official visit scheduled. That said, I like where Georgia stands right now. And because I do think Georgia was the driving reason behind his decision to decommit from South Carolina, I'm going with Payton Dyer.
Really like that pick. That's one where I kind of try to keep notes and try to keep in mind guys to consider, and that was a total miss. We're talking to our scouts. He should have been on our board. I really like that pick of Payton Dyer.
Well, that's okay, because I think I've told you already, I'm supposed to be the recruiting guy, allegedly, right? And there have been multiple picks that you've made during the course of this predicted commit year where, you know, I think of Jordan Smith, I think of Kamari Brooks, like a couple guys that I did not have on my board at the time. Like, I usually have one or two guys that I'm going to select from, and I didn't have them either of the days that you picked them, and I regret that deeply.
So we gotta keep it competitive.
All right, so for you, we've got running back Derek Cooper, linebacker Tyler Atkinson, defensive lineman Carter Lucky, tight end Mark Bowman, defensive back Jordan Smith, offensive lineman Jared Smith, edge rusher, outside linebacker Kamari Brooks, quarterback Jared Curtis, defensive lineman now. You drafted him as an offensive lineman. I'll just put that out there. But defensive lineman PJ Dean and wide receiver Craig Dandridge. I will say before you make your pick, since we have been recording this show, Jordan, I have gotten a text message from someone that I trust that says that someone on your team, they are told, is heavily leaning towards Georgia. So I will give you that right now. I'm not going to say who it was, but I will say there is somebody on the team that I got a text during this recording about a player that I think you will eventually get a check mark next to their name.
We're not going to go 0-4, and that was the whole plan. Just get one on the board. That's all we needed. We're going for another one here, and we're going to go down to the state of Florida, and we're getting James Johnson, defensive lineman from Miami. You did a great job in your mock class just kind of talking about James Johnson and explain that, you know, this sits with you as the kind of defensive lineman Georgia wants to go and get, a recruitment they want to go win. 6'2.5", 285 pounds. Going to be very competitive. We know how hard it is to pull guys out of Miami. I like Georgia's ability to go in and, show a guy like James Johnson, a guy like Jalen Carter that they got out of the state of Florida, out of Apopka, 4-star, number 10 defensive lineman in the country. I don't know how soon a guy like James Johnson is going to make a decision, but to me, he checks the boxes of what Georgia wants in a defensive lineman. Won't come easy, but I got James Johnson as my predicted commit.
I like the pick a lot. Like, he was in my mock class. I've considered it at times. Like, my fear, you brought up what my fear has been around that one is, he's from Florida at a time when it feels like Florida is on the upswing in terms of roster building. It feels like Miami is on the upswing in terms of roster building, and Florida State's probably about as desperate as they've ever been. And so you're recruiting a kid from Florida at a time when it's really hard to get a guy out of Florida that the Florida schools really want. That said, you mentioned it, Jalen Carter, Jordan Hall. I mean, you can even go away from defensive line and go like Raylan Wilson. Like, there are people from Florida that you would traditionally say, how's state of Florida is not going to let this guy get out of the state, yet Georgia tends to find a way. So I do like that pick. Bold pick just because he is a very highly rated defensive lineman. He's someone that I think, talk about a guy arrow pointing up. I think arrow pointing up on James Johnson. And so, because of that, does it become increasingly harder throughout the year to be able to land him? Yes, but I think at this exact moment that you're picking him, I think Georgia's the right choice. So I think that that's a great selection by you.
Appreciate that. And it feels like these last few years, especially like with Florida, it seems like Georgia and Florida go back and forth on defensive line commits, and Georgia trying to flip guys, and Florida winning some and Georgia winning some. So it'll be a fun one to follow.